Melissa Carter's 35th birthday should have felt like a celebration. The evening was warm for early spring in Illinois, the air carrying the faint smell of cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from neighboring yards. She had spent the day quietly, expecting her husband to surprise her later. A soft dress hung perfectly against her frame, her hair brushed with care, a gentle hope glowing in her chest. But as the night unfolded, that hope would be crushed in a way she could never forget. Before diving into this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this one. Melissa's husband, Daniel Carter, carried the kind of confidence that filled any room. A tall man with an expensive watch glinting under the light, he lived as though the world should bow to him. Tonight, he had organized a small gathering at their suburban home. Neighbors and a few of Daniel's colleagues from the real estate firm mingled around the patio, sipping cocktails while the grill hissed with steaks. Laughter rose into the evening sky, but Melissa's smile was forced. When Daniel finally lifted his glass, Melissa thought for a fleeting second that he was about to honor her. Instead, he said, "I think we all know I'm the lucky one here." Not because of Melissa's cooking or her parties, though she tries, but because she keeps everything simple. "My wife doesn't make life complicated. She's never really adventurous. Just steady, predictable." The guests chuckled politely, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Melissa's chest tightened. His words were coated with charm, yet underneath, they stung with humiliation. She lowered her gaze, pretending to adjust the hem of her dress, but inside her pride was splintering. Her best friend, Rachel Johnson, stood across the table, her sharp eyes narrowing. Rachel had driven from Chicago to be there, and she knew Melissa well enough to see the pain behind her smile. As conversation shifted, Rachel leaned closer and whispered, "You don't deserve this." "Not tonight, not ever." Melissa forced a small laugh. "It's fine, he's just showing off." "Showing off at your expense," Rachel countered firmly. "There's a difference." Daniel clinked his glass against his colleagues, oblivious to the discomfort spreading among the guests. He thrived on being the center of attention, confident that Melissa would always play her quiet role. As the evening wound down, Melissa found herself alone in the kitchen, rinsing dishes while muffled laughter floated in from outside. Her hands trembled beneath the warm water. Memories flooded her mind, dreams she once carried in New York during her college years, ambitions that had withered after marriage. She wondered when exactly she had traded her voice for silence. Rachel entered quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to keep letting him do this," she said softly. Melissa shook her head, her eyes glistening. "What am I supposed to do, Rachel? This is my life now." "No," Rachel replied, her tone steady. "This is the life he's convinced you to settle for." "There's a difference." The words lingered in Melissa's mind long after Rachel left that night. She sat alone in the living room, the clock ticking louder than usual. The house was quiet, but her thoughts were restless, echoing with Daniel's laughter and the polite chuckles of their guests. For the first time in years, anger outweighed resignation. Melissa didn't yet know how, but something inside her had shifted. The humiliation she endured on her birthday wasn't just another bruise on her pride. It was a breaking point. And as she stared into the darkened window, seeing her own reflection framed by the suburban night, she realized one truth. Silence had protected Daniel's ego, but it had cost her dignity. That silence would not last forever. The following morning, Melissa stood by the kitchen counter, the smell of freshly brewed coffee rising into the air. The sunlight spilled through the blinds, bright but unforgiving, almost as though it exposed everything she wanted to keep hidden. Daniel scrolled through his phone at the breakfast table, his tie already loosened as if he couldn't wait to leave. "Last night with something," Melissa said carefully, hoping for acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. Daniel didn't look up. "Yeah, people had fun. Good turnout." Her lips tightened. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." Finally, his eyes flicked toward her. "Embarrassed you? Come on, Melissa, it was a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Everyone knows you're steady, and that's not a bad thing." Her chest tightened again. He sipped his coffee without a shred of regret, leaving her with words that cut deeper than silence. Melissa turned away, pretending to busy herself with dishes, though her hands gripped the sink edge until her knuckles turned pale. Later that afternoon, Rachel called. "How are you holding up?" Melissa hesitated before answering. "I'm fine, just tired." "No, you're not," Rachel shot back. "You've been carrying his words for years, but last night, Melissa, last night was cruel. He turned your birthday into a stage for his ego." Melissa sat on the couch staring at the family photos lining the wall. Smiles captured in still frames, children hugging their father. Vacations where she stood just slightly behind Daniel. In every picture she was present, but invisible. "He doesn't mean it the way it sounds," she whispered, though even to herself the excuse felt hollow. Rachel's voice softened. "You've always defended him, but when was the last time he defended you? You give him loyalty, but what does he give back?" Melissa's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but no words came. She had lived years in the shadow of his confidence, convincing herself that stability was worth the price of being unseen. Yet Rachel's words scratched against something raw inside her. That evening, Daniel returned home later than expected, the faint smell of expensive cologne clinging to him. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and loosened his tie with a grin that never reached his eyes. "Clients love me," he announced. "Closed 2 big deals today. That's why you get to enjoy this house, Melissa, because I make things happen." Melissa bit her tongue. She wanted to say she, too, once made things happen. She wanted to remind him of the woman he met in New York, ambitious and daring. But she remained quiet, her silence once again feeding his pride. When the kids were asleep, Melissa stepped out into the backyard. The night was cooler than the one before, the sky clear, stars scattered like fragile promises. She wrapped her arms around herself, the ache in her chest heavy. Rachel's words echoed in her head. "When was the last time he defended you?" For years, Melissa believed that being steady meant being strong, that patience was her greatest contribution. But last night, patience had turned into a weapon against her, twisted by the man who once vowed to cherish her. The laughter of their guests replayed like a cruel soundtrack, each chuckle sharpening her wound. As the wind brushed against her skin, Melissa admitted something she had never dared before. She was lonely in her own marriage. Lonelier than she had ever been, even in her quietest childhood days. The realization was devastating, but it also carried a flicker of clarity. Her life, her dignity, her future, none of it could survive if she kept pretending his mockery was harmless. The wound was no longer something she could ignore. And though she didn't yet know what she would do, Melissa felt the faintest tremor of change deep inside, like the first crack in a dam before the flood. Melissa sat alone in the living room one quiet Saturday morning, a mug of coffee cooling on the table beside her. The children had gone out with Daniel to a sports practice, leaving the house unusually silent. She should have been grateful for the calm, but instead the quiet pressed against her chest, amplifying thoughts she had tried to bury for years. She picked up an old photo album from the shelf, dust clinging to the corners. Flipping through the pages, she found herself staring at a picture from her college days in New York. Her hair was shorter, her eyes brighter, her smile wider. In that frozen moment, she was a young woman brimming with ambition, ready to conquer the world of marketing and communications. She had dreamed of traveling, of pitching bold ideas in sleek offices, of proving herself on her own terms. Her fingers lingered on the picture, and a wave of bitter-sweet memory swept through her. She remembered nights spent in coffee shops with classmates, brainstorming campaigns fueled by determination and laughter. Back then she believed there was no limit to what she could achieve. The sound of the front door unlocking snapped her out of her thoughts. Rachel's voice echoed from the entryway. "Melissa, you home?" Melissa quickly wiped her eyes before Rachel stepped into the room. "I wasn't expecting you today." Rachel dropped her bag on the armchair and studied her. "You've been quiet since your birthday, that worries me." Melissa hesitated before showing her the photo. "Look at her. She wanted so much more than this." Rachel leaned closer, her expression soft but firm. "That girl is still you. She hasn't disappeared, Melissa. She's just been silenced. You let Daniel's voice drown out your own." Melissa's lips trembled. "I gave up everything for this family, for stability, for the kids. I thought that's what I was supposed to do." "There's nothing wrong with sacrifice," Rachel replied. "But there's a difference between sacrifice and erasure. You didn't give up your dreams. You let someone convince you they weren't worth having anymore." Melissa swallowed hard, her chest tightening with a mixture of sorrow and defiance. Rachel's words pressed on the fragile place inside her, where hope still lived. The conversation carried into the kitchen. Melissa made tea as Rachel leaned against the counter. "You have the talent, the brains, and the resilience," Rachel said. "You just need to stop waiting for permission to live your own life." Melissa's eyes dropped to the steaming kettle. "It's been so long. I wouldn't even know where to start." "Start by remembering who you are," Rachel urged. "Call your old mentors, look up companies, put yourself back out there. Even small steps matter." The suggestion both frightened and excited her. She imagined the skepticism on Daniel's face, the way he would dismiss her efforts as nothing more than a passing phase. Yet underneath the fear stirred a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. That night, when the children were asleep and Daniel worked on his laptop, Melissa sat in the study, staring at the blank screen of her computer. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then slowly she began typing her name into LinkedIn, dusting off an account she had abandoned a decade earlier. As she scrolled through old connections, she recognized names of professors, classmates, and colleagues who had once praised her creativity. Her pulse quickened. It was a small action, but it felt monumental. For the first time in years, Melissa wasn't waiting for Daniel's approval or the world's permission. She was reaching for something that belonged to her alone. She didn't yet know how far this path would take her, but as she stared at her refreshed profile, Melissa felt something stir deep within her, a hidden strength, fragile but undeniable, beginning to rise. The following week, Melissa found herself sitting at her desk in the small study, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen seeping into the silence. Her freshly updated profile stared back at her from the screen, neat and professional, though it still felt like a fragile mask of the woman she used to be. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through names she hadn't seen in years. Finally, she hovered over one, Professor Linda Graham, her old marketing advisor. With trembling fingers, she drafted a short message. "It's been a long time. I hope you're well. I'd love to reconnect." She read it over 3 times before hitting send. The moment the message flew off the screen, her breath caught. It was small, but it felt like she had leapt across a canyon. Later that day, while folding laundry, she checked her phone compulsively. A notification blinked across the screen. "Melissa, so good to hear from you. Let's catch up this week." "I'd love to hear what you've been doing." Melissa's eyes stung with sudden tears. Someone remembered her. Someone valued her beyond the role of wife and mother. That evening, over dinner, she tried to share her excitement. "I reconnected with my old professor. She suggested we talk about opportunities in marketing again." Daniel, cutting into his steak, didn't bother to look at her. "Marketing? Melissa, it's been over a decade. The industry has passed you by. You're not cut out for that world anymore." Her fork paused midway to her mouth. "You don't even know what I'm capable of." He smirked. "I know you're good at keeping this house together, at making sure the kids are fine. Why complicate things? Stay in your lane, Melissa." His words stabbed deeper than he realized, but this time she didn't retreat into silence. She placed her fork down and met his gaze. "Maybe my lane is bigger than you think." The table fell quiet except for the clinking of cutlery. Inside, Melissa's pulse raced. For the first time she had pushed back even just slightly. Daniel dismissed it with a shrug, but Melissa knew she had crossed an invisible line, and she didn't regret it. The next day, Melissa sat in a quiet cafe downtown, waiting for Professor Graham. The smell of roasted coffee beans surrounded her, mingling with the chatter of customers and the hiss of the espresso machine. When the older woman finally appeared, her warm smile made Melissa's chest loosen. "You look wonderful," Professor Graham said, pulling her into a hug. "I always knew you had a spark. What happened?" Melissa hesitated, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. "Life," marriage, children. I stopped believing that spark mattered. Professor Graham shook her head firmly. It always matters. Talent doesn't disappear, it just waits. And I remember your ideas, Melissa. You thought differently, and that's still valuable today. If you're ready, I can put you in touch with someone who needs consulting work. Melissa's heart raced. Consulting? For marketing? Yes. Small businesses often need help with campaigns, and you'd be excellent. The thought of stepping back into that world filled Melissa with both fear and exhilaration. I don't know if I'm ready. You'll never feel ready, Professor Graham said gently. But readiness comes from doing, not waiting. That night, Melissa sat at her desk once again. An email draft blinked at her, addressed to a small business owner Professor Graham had recommended. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, then finally began to type. Each word carried both doubt and determination, but when she hit send, she felt a rush of something she hadn't felt in years, momentum. As she leaned back in her chair, Melissa realized this was only the beginning. The first step had been taken, and though the road ahead was uncertain, it was hers to walk. Melissa's nerves buzzed as she waited for a reply to the email she had sent the night before. She refreshed her inbox 3 times in the span of 10 minutes, then forced herself to step away. She folded laundry, wiped down the counters, anything to keep her restless hands busy. When the notification finally chimed, her breath caught. The small business owner had responded enthusiastically, asking to schedule a call. She pressed her palm to her chest, heart racing. It wasn't a job yet, but it was a start. For the first time in years, she felt like she was moving towards something of her own. That weekend, Melissa met her younger brothers, Ethan and Eric, at a diner on the edge of town. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh pancakes filled the air as they slid into the booth across from her. Both men were in their early 30s, energetic and straightforward, protective of their sister in ways Daniel had never been. "You look different," Ethan said, squinting at her. "Not bad different, good different, like you've got something brewing." Melissa smiled faintly. "Maybe I do. I've been reconnecting with people from my past. A professor linked me to someone who might want marketing help." Eric raised his eyebrows. "Finally! About time you started doing something for you. Dan's not going to like it, though." Melissa stirred her coffee, her voice quieter. "He already made his opinion clear. He thinks I should stay in my lane." Ethan leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Your lane? That man has no idea who you are. We grew up with you, Mel. You were the one who convinced us we could aim higher than Dad's garage business. You've got a brain that doesn't quit." Her eyes watered at the memory. She had forgotten how much she once inspired them. "Listen," Eric said, lowering his voice. "A friend of mine runs a small startup. He's been looking for help with branding and outreach. If you're serious, I can introduce you. He'd take your advice seriously." Melissa blinked, stunned. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," Eric replied. "You've spent years carrying everyone else. Let us carry you for once." The warmth in his words seeped into her chest, softening the ache that Daniel's dismissals had left behind. For years she had felt isolated, but here were her brothers, reminding her that family could also mean encouragement instead of criticism. A week later, Melissa found herself in a video call with Eric's friend Jason Miller, the founder of a small but growing fitness apparel brand. His tone was friendly but professional as he explained his struggles. "We've got a good product, but no one knows who we are. I need someone to help shape our story, make us stand out." Melissa listened intently, scribbling notes. Her mind lit up with ideas: social media campaigns, customer testimonials, targeted outreach. She had almost forgotten how quickly her brain worked when challenged. When Jason finished, he asked, "So, what do you think? Be honest." Melissa hesitated for only a moment before speaking with clarity. "I think your brand has heart, but it's hiding behind generic messages. People don't connect with statistics, they connect with people. If we highlight real customers and their journeys, you won't just sell clothes, you'll sell confidence. That's your story." There was a pause, then Jason smiled. "That's exactly the kind of perspective I need. Let's set up a trial project, see how it goes." Melissa ended the call with her pulse racing. It wasn't just polite interest. He had trusted her ideas, valued her voice. She sat back in her chair, a rush of adrenaline mixing with pride. For the first time in years, Melissa didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, capable, and supported. And with Ethan and Eric standing behind her, she knew she wasn't walking this path alone. Melissa's first project with Jason had gone better than she imagined. Her ideas translated into a small but successful campaign, and his business saw a noticeable increase in engagement. The praise gave her a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in years. But as her voice grew stronger outside the house, tension inside her home began to rise like a storm cloud. At Sunday's family barbecue, Daniel stood at the head of the patio table, laughing with his cousins. Melissa carried a tray of lemonade, careful not to spill, when Daniel's voice rang out. "You all know Melissa's been busy pretending she's a businesswoman now. She even thinks she's consulting. Cute, isn't it?" The group chuckled uneasily, their eyes flicking toward her. Melissa froze, the tray trembling in her hands. Daniel's smirk widened, as though her silence proved his point. Heat rushed to her face, but she forced herself to walk past, setting the lemonade down without a word. Rachel, who had come along for support, leaned over. "He's trying to keep you small because he's scared. Don't give him the satisfaction." Later that night, Melissa confronted him while the kids were upstairs. "Why do you keep belittling me in front of people? Do you know how humiliating that feels?" Daniel didn't even pause from loosening his tie. "Melissa, it's a joke. People know you're not serious. Don't make a big deal out of nothing." "It is a big deal to me," she said firmly, her voice shaking but steady. "I'm working hard and you won't even respect that." He sighed, finally meeting her eyes. "You're overreacting. You've got no idea how tough the real world is. Stay focused on the kids in this house, that's where you belong." Her chest tightened, but she didn't retreat this time. "Maybe where I belong is bigger than you think." Daniel scoffed and turned away, leaving her with the sting of dismissal. The wall between them was growing, brick by brick. The next evening, as Melissa tucked Chloe into bed, her daughter looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mum, when I grow up, I want to be like Dad. He's strong. He makes money. Everyone listens to him." The words cut sharper than any of Daniel's remarks. Melissa kissed Chloe's forehead, but inside she felt her resolve harden. If her daughter only saw power in arrogance, what example had she set all these years by staying silent? In the quiet after bedtime, Melissa sat at her desk, staring at the glowing screen. She thought of Jason trusting her instincts, of Ethan and Eric reminding her of her worth, of Rachel urging her to reclaim her voice. For so long, Daniel's criticism had been the loudest sound in her life, but it was no longer the only one. Still, the fear lingered. What if Daniel was right? What if she failed and proved him correct? The doubts clawed at her, yet underneath them was a flicker of determination. She could no longer accept that her children saw strength only in their father. They needed to see it in her, too. Melissa closed her laptop and whispered to herself, "I have to keep going, for me and for them." The rising wall of Daniel's arrogance threatened to cage her, but for the first time, Melissa wasn't content to stay trapped inside. She had begun to feel the cracks forming in its foundation, and she knew she had to push harder before it sealed her fate forever. Melissa adjusted the strap of her bag nervously as she stepped into the downtown Chicago office building, where Jason had arranged for her to give a short presentation. The polished marble floor gleamed beneath her shoes, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and ambition. Her palms were damp and her throat dry. It had been years since she had stood in front of a group of professionals. "Just talk like you did with me," Jason reassured her in the elevator. "You've got the ideas, trust yourself." She nodded, though her stomach churned. When they entered the small conference room, 3 staff members greeted her politely, their notepads ready. Melissa took a deep breath and began speaking, her voice wavering at first but growing steadier as she outlined a campaign strategy. She highlighted storytelling, customer connection, and the importance of authenticity. Halfway through, one of the staff interrupted with a skeptical question. For a split second, panic flared, but then Melissa remembered late nights in college, debating with peers, backing up her arguments with conviction. She inhaled, steadied herself, and answered with clarity. The room fell quiet. Then one of them nodded slowly, impressed. By the time she finished, Jason smiled broadly. See, exactly what I told you. They needed fresh perspective. Melissa's pulse raced with relief. She hadn't been perfect, but she had been good enough. More than that, she had been herself. After the meeting, Jason handed her an envelope. It's not much, but it's payment for your time. You earned it. Melissa held the envelope with trembling fingers. It wasn't about the money, though the crisp bills inside felt surreal. It was about proof that her ideas had value, that she wasn't just Daniel's shadow or the children's caretaker. That evening, back at home, she slipped into her bedroom while Daniel was showering. She opened the envelope again, staring at the modest sum. For years, she had managed the family's budget, but hadn't contributed a cent of her own. Tonight, she held tangible evidence of her independence. She decided to celebrate in a small but meaningful way. The next afternoon, while running errands, Melissa stopped at a local boutique and bought herself a simple silver bracelet. It wasn't extravagant, just elegant, with a thin band that shimmered under the store's light. When she fastened it around her wrist, she whispered to herself, "This is mine." At dinner that night, Daniel noticed. New jewelry. Where'd that come from? Melissa lifted her wrist casually. I bought it for myself. He raised an eyebrow. With what money? Her voice stayed calm. With my own. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. What, did Jason pay you? That's pocket money, Melissa. Don't get carried away. The sting of his dismissal should have deflated her, but instead, it fueled her resolve. She didn't argue. She simply turned back to her meal, the cool touch of the bracelet against her skin reminding her that progress didn't need his validation. Later, as she tucked Chloe into bed, her daughter noticed the bracelet. It's pretty, Mum. Did Dad buy it for you? Melissa smiled gently. No, sweetheart. I bought it for myself. Chloe's eyes widened. You did? Yes. And one day, you'll be able to buy things for yourself too. Never forget that. Chloe nodded thoughtfully, and Melissa kissed her forehead. As she walked out of the room, Melissa felt lighter. The road ahead was still uncertain, but tonight she had taken another step. She had tested the waters, and for the first time in years, she believed she could swim. Melissa's phone buzzed early Monday morning, jolting her awake before the sun had fully risen. She rubbed her eyes, expecting a routine reminder, but instead found an email from Jason. Her heart skipped as she read, Melissa, the campaign worked better than expected. Sales jumped by 18% this weekend. Customers are engaging with our story, just like you said they would. I'd like to offer you another project, this time on a bigger scale. Her chest filled with warmth. It wasn't just a polite thank you. It was recognition. She pressed her hand against her mouth, a smile spreading across her face. At the kitchen table, she shared the news with Rachel over the phone. He wants me to take on more. Can you believe it? Rachel's voice came through sharp and enthusiastic. Of course I can believe it. I've always known you had this in you. This is just the beginning, Melissa. Melissa's hand trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. It feels unreal, like I'm walking in a dream I thought I gave up years ago. Rachel chuckled. It's not a dream. It's reality finally catching up with you. Keep going. Later that week, Melissa worked late into the night, sketching out new ideas for Jason's brand. The glow of her laptop lit up the study, her silver bracelet catching the light as her hands moved quickly across the keyboard. She felt alive, her mind sparking with energy she hadn't tapped into in years. The results spoke for themselves. Jason introduced her to 2 other small business owners who needed help, and both reached out within days. Her inbox, once quiet, now buzzed with opportunity. One evening, Ethan called her. Eric told me about the work you're doing. Jason can't stop talking about you. I'm proud of you, sis. Melissa swallowed the lump in her throat. Thank you. I didn't think I'd hear that again. You earned it, Ethan said firmly. Don't let anyone take that away from you. The validation from her brothers combined with Rachel's steady encouragement wrapped around her like armor. But Daniel noticed the shift too. He watched as she came home with a light in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. One night, as she typed at the dining table, he muttered, "So what's the end game here, Melissa? You think you're going to build some empire?" Melissa didn't look up. "I don't need an empire. I just need to know I can stand on my own 2 feet." He smirked, shaking his head. "You're getting carried away." But this time, his words slid off her like rain against a window. The sting was gone. She was too focused on her work, too anchored by the proof of her ability. The moment that sealed it came 2 weeks later, when Jason called to update her. "Melissa, I showed your campaign to a group of investors. They were impressed. They asked who was behind it. I gave them your name. They want to meet you." Melissa nearly dropped the phone. "They want me?" "Yes," Jason said, his tone excited. "You've got something rare. Don't underestimate it." When she ended the call, Melissa sat quietly for a long time, her hand pressed against her racing heart. For so long she had believed Daniel's voice that she wasn't enough. Now she had evidence that she was more than enough. The spark had caught fire, and Melissa realized this wasn't just a fleeting moment of luck. This was the beginning of something bigger than she had ever dared to imagine. Melissa's successes continued to grow, each project adding weight to her confidence, but within the walls of her home, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Daniel no longer laughed off her work. He challenged it, picking apart her time, her choices, her dedication. The more she stood tall outside, the more he tried to push her back down inside. One Friday evening, as she set her laptop on the dining table to review notes, Daniel walked in, loosening his tie. His tone carried irritation before he even spoke. "Another night on that computer. Melissa, do you ever think about how this looks? The kids need you, the house needs you." "I come home and all I see is you glued to that screen." Melissa looked up calmly. "The kids are fine, dinner's ready, homework's done. I'm not neglecting anything, Daniel. I'm just doing something for myself." He scoffed. "For yourself? This family runs because of me, my income, my effort. Don't start thinking your side projects are equal to what I provide." The words burned, but Melissa didn't flinch. "Equal? Maybe not yet. But valuable? Absolutely. You don't get to decide the worth of what I do." His jaw tightened. "You're forgetting your place." She pushed her chair back, standing slowly, her voice low but steady. "No, Daniel. I'm finally remembering it." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument they had shared before. Days later, the tensions spilled over during a Saturday outing. They had taken the children to a local park. Families picnicked on the grass. Children's laughter carried through the crisp air. Melissa watched Chloe run ahead with her brother, her heart warm when Daniel leaned close, his voice sharp. "You're slipping, Melissa. You're not the same wife I married. You used to support me, keep things simple. Now you're distracted, restless. I don't like it." Melissa turned, meeting his eyes without fear. "Maybe I'm not the same. Maybe that's the problem. You married me because I was steady, predictable. But I was also ambitious, Daniel. You just stopped seeing it." He frowned, his voice rising. "So what? Now you want to compete with me? Outshine me?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I don't want to outshine you. I just don't want to disappear behind you anymore." Their words cut through the playful shouts of their children, who came running back, unaware of the storm between their parents. Melissa forced a smile for them, but inside her chest ached. The cracks were no longer hidden, they were visible, undeniable. That night, as she tucked Chloe in, her daughter whispered, "Mom, are you and Dad mad at each other?" Melissa's throat tightened. She brushed Chloe's hair gently. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree, but it doesn't mean we don't love you." Chloe's small voice trembled. "I just want you to be happy." Tears pricked Melissa's eyes, but she smiled. "I will be. I promise." When she closed the door, her chest felt heavy with the weight of that promise. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The marriage that once felt unshakable was now fractured, and for the first time Melissa wasn't sure it could be repaired. Yet beneath the ache there was clarity. She was no longer willing to shrink herself to preserve Daniel's pride. Her children deserved to see their mother as more than a shadow. And as Melissa lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she realized the cracks in her marriage were also openings, openings to a life where her voice finally mattered. Melissa was reviewing campaign notes at her desk when a new email appeared at the top of her inbox. The subject line read, "Invitation, New York Business Networking Gala." Her stomach flipped as she clicked it open. The message explained that her recent work with Jason's brand had impressed a group of investors and entrepreneurs. They wanted her to attend the gala, meet potential collaborators, and share her perspective. Her pulse raced as she reread the words, New York. A city tied to her old dreams, the place where her ambition was born. It felt like the universe was pulling her back to the woman she used to be. But alongside excitement came fear. Could she really stand among powerful, accomplished professionals after so many years away? That evening she told Rachel over the phone, "They want me to go to New York, to a gala. Rachel, what if I embarrass myself? What if I freeze?" Rachel laughed softly, her voice brimming with confidence. "Melissa, do you hear yourself? They invited you. They already see your worth. The only question is whether you'll let yourself see it too." Melissa leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "It feels too big, too fast." "That's what growth feels like," Rachel said firmly. "Go." Don't let fear make this decision for you. The next day, as Melissa sorted laundry, she rehearsed what she might say if someone asked about her work. The words tangled in her mind, her confidence wavering. She imagined Daniel's mocking voice, "You don't belong there. You'll make a fool of yourself." When she shared the news with him at dinner, his reaction was as sharp as she feared. "A gala in New York? Melissa, that's not your world. Do you really think these people will take you seriously? They'll eat you alive." Melissa set her fork down, her voice calm but steady. "They invited me, Daniel. That means they already take me seriously." He smirked, shaking his head. "You're delusional." Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. "No. I'm determined." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the clatter of silverware. Inside, Melissa's fear churned, but under it all was a flicker of defiance that refused to die. The weekend before the gala, Rachel came over with a garment bag draped over her arm. "I'm not letting you show up in anything less than stunning." Melissa's eyes widened as Rachel unzipped the bag, revealing a sleek navy blue dress that struck the perfect balance between elegance and power. Melissa reached out, fingertips brushing the fabric. "Rachel, this is too much." "No," Rachel insisted. "This is exactly what you need. You've spent years blending in." "It's time you stood out." Melissa tried on the dress, her reflection startling her. The woman in the mirror wasn't invisible. She wasn't small or quiet. She looked capable, confident, even if part of her didn't feel it yet. Rachel's eyes softened. "That's the Melissa I remember, the one who used to walk into rooms with her head high." Melissa blinked back tears. "I'm not sure I can be her again." "You don't have to be who you were," Rachel said gently. "You just have to be who you are now. Stronger, wiser, ready." That night, Melissa hung the dress carefully, her heart pounding. The fear hadn't vanished, but excitement now burned alongside it. For years she had buried her ambition under duty and silence. Now she had an invitation to step back into the world she once dreamed of, and for the first time in a long time, Melissa whispered to herself with conviction, "I belong there." Melissa returned from New York with her heart still humming from the energy of the gala. The city lights, the conversations with sharp minds, the applause after she spoke about authenticity and branding, it all replayed in her memory like a vivid dream. For the first time in years, she hadn't just existed in a room, she had commanded it. Back home, she sat at her desk reviewing the new contracts offered by investors she'd met. The numbers stunned her. What had started as small consulting work was turning into something far larger than she imagined. She was finally standing on ground she had once only dreamed of. After days of weighing options, Melissa decided to do something bold, something that wasn't about Daniel or the kids or appearances. It was for herself. She drove into Chicago, her heart racing as she walked into a luxury car dealership. The sleek vehicles glistened under the showroom lights, each one whispering of independence and possibility. Melissa's fingers trailed over the smooth paint of a black Lexus SUV. The salesman approached, his polite smile practiced, but Melissa didn't falter. "I want this one," she said with steady conviction. Signing the papers felt surreal. When the keys were pressed into her palm, she tightened her grip, not just on metal but on proof of her own power. As she slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool beneath her hands, Melissa whispered, "This is mine." Driving home, she felt a rush of exhilaration. The engine purred with strength, the city lights reflecting off the hood like stars aligning for her. This wasn't about status or luxury, it was about reclaiming her worth, about driving forward on her own terms. When she pulled into the driveway, Daniel stood by the door, his expression unreadable. The children rushed outside, their eyes wide. "Mom, is this your car?" Chloe gasped. Melissa smiled, her heart swelling. "Yes, it's ours, but it's mine too." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What is this? Some kind of show?" Melissa stepped out, her voice calm but resolute. "No, Daniel, it's a choice, my choice." He laughed, though it sounded forced. "With what money? My money." Melissa looked him in the eye. "And with mine from my work. From the projects you said didn't matter." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the excited chatter of the kids climbing inside, running their hands over the seats. Daniel's smirk faltered, replaced with a flicker of something Melissa had never seen in his eyes before: uncertainty. That evening he tried again. "Melissa, don't fool yourself. A car doesn't make you powerful. It's just metal and wheels." Melissa fastened the silver bracelet on her wrist, glancing at it before meeting his gaze. "You're right. The car doesn't make me powerful. But the woman who bought it, she is." For the first time, Daniel had no comeback. Later, as she stood at the window watching the SUV gleam under the porch light, Melissa felt a profound shift. It wasn't the vehicle itself, it was what it represented. For years she had measured her worth through the lens of others. Now every mile she would drive reminded her that she was capable of building, of choosing, of owning her path. The car was more than transportation, it was a declaration. And with it, Melissa knew there was no turning back to the silence that once defined her. Melissa's new car became more than transportation. It became a symbol that rippled through her family. The children beamed with pride every time she picked them up from school. Chloe would lean forward from the back seat, her eyes wide with admiration. "Mom, everyone was talking about your car today. They said it looks like something powerful women drive." Melissa glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's not the car that makes someone powerful, Chloe. It's the choices they make, the way they believe in themselves." Chloe tilted her head. "So you bought it because you believe in yourself?" Melissa's throat tightened. "Yes. And I want you to believe in yourself too, always." The conversation stayed with her long after they reached home. For years, Melissa had worried about the example she was setting for her children. Now she realized she was finally modeling strength. That weekend, Ethan and Eric visited. They stood in the driveway circling the SUV with grins plastered across their faces. "Well, look at you," Ethan said, patting the hood. "This isn't just a car, it's a statement." Eric crossed his arms, his tone filled with pride. "I knew you'd do it. You've always had it in you. It just took you a while to remember." Melissa laughed softly, though her eyes glistened. "I forgot who I was for a long time. But I think I'm finding her again." Her brothers exchanged a look that spoke volumes, one of unspoken relief and admiration. For years they had worried about her silence, her fading spark. Now they saw it reignite. Inside the house, over coffee, Ethan leaned forward. "You know, Mum would have been proud of you, would have. She always told us you were the one who dreamed bigger than all of us combined." Melissa's chest swelled with emotion. "I hope so. I just want my kids to see that they don't have to shrink themselves to fit someone else's expectations." As if on cue, Chloe walked in, holding her sketchbook. "Mum, I drew a picture of you." She opened the book, revealing a drawing of Melissa standing next to the car, smiling, her hands on her hips. Above the figure, Chloe had written in big letters, "Strong." Melissa's breath caught. Chloe, this is beautiful. Her daughter's voice was steady. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not just because of the car. Because you look brave. Tears blurred Melissa's vision as she hugged her tightly. For years, she had feared Chloe would only see strength in Daniel, in his confidence and control. Now her daughter was beginning to see it in her. That realization lit a fire inside Melissa stronger than any criticism could extinguish. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the table, Melissa caught Daniel watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. He didn't speak, but she noticed the tension in his jaw. For once, she didn't feel the urge to soften the moment for his comfort. She let the pride in her children's eyes linger, a quiet rebellion he couldn't erase. After dinner, Eric pulled Melissa aside. Don't stop now. The kids are watching. You're changing how they see the world and how they see themselves. Melissa nodded, her heart steady. She had started this journey to reclaim her own dignity, but now she understood it was bigger than her. It was about shaping her children's future, proving that strength didn't always roar. It sometimes spoke softly but refused to bend. For the first time in years, Melissa felt truly supported, not just by friends or clients, but by family, and that support gave her the courage to keep moving forward, no matter how high the walls around her might rise. The Carter family gathered for a large dinner at Daniel's parents' house, a tradition meant to celebrate milestones. The long dining table was crowded with relatives, plates of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and glasses of wine spread across its length. Melissa arrived with her brothers, Ethan and Eric, and her children, her head held high. Her luxury SUV gleamed outside in the driveway, drawing whispers the moment they stepped inside. Daniel noticed the stares and smirked as if to reclaim control. He raised his glass once everyone had settled. "Let's toast," he said loudly, drawing attention to himself. "To success. Real success. The kind that keeps food on the table and a roof over our heads. Not the kind of little hobbies that distract from family." The words cut like glass, sharper because of the eyes fixed on Melissa. Laughter bubbled around the table, though it was uneasy. Melissa's heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't shrink this time. She calmly placed her fork down, straightened her back, and let the silence hang before speaking. Her voice was steady. "It's interesting, Daniel, how you measure success only in what you provide. But success is also raising children who respect both parents. It's showing them dignity, teaching them strength. And I won't allow my children to believe humiliation equals love." A hush fell over the table. Daniel's smirk faltered, replaced by a tight jaw. "Melissa, this isn't the place." She met his gaze without fear. "It's exactly the place. You chose to belittle me here in front of family, but tonight you'll see who I really am." Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's right. We've watched her grow, Daniel. She's building something with her own hands. Maybe you should start respecting it instead of tearing it down." Eric added, "You call it a hobby, but others call it talent. Businesses trust her. Investors trust her. Maybe it's time you did too." Murmurs rippled across the table. Melissa could feel her pulse racing, but she kept her expression composed. She wasn't fighting for validation anymore. She was standing in truth. Chloe, seated beside her, looked up with wide eyes. "Mum, you're strong," she whispered, her words barely audible, but enough for Melissa's heart to swell. Daniel shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the family's silence. For years he had controlled the narrative, but now his confidence wavered. He glanced around, expecting laughter, but found none. Instead, all eyes were on Melissa, the woman he had underestimated for too long. Finally, Melissa rose from her seat, her bracelet glinting under the chandelier. Her voice didn't tremble. "I won't apologize for who I am anymore. I won't accept being reduced to the shadow of someone else's pride. My children will know that their mother has value, not because of what anyone gives her, but because of what she builds herself." No one spoke. The silence was louder than any argument. Melissa stepped back from the table, Ethan and Eric rising beside her in quiet solidarity. Her children followed, their small hands slipping into hers. As she walked toward the door, Daniel remained seated, his glass still in his hand, his authority unraveling. He had tried to humiliate her once again, but instead, he had revealed the truth for everyone to see. Melissa was no longer the silent woman by his side. Out in the driveway, the night air was cool, the SUV gleaming beneath the streetlight. Melissa opened the door for her children, her brothers flanking her with pride. For the first time, she felt completely free of the chains of his mockery. The breaking point had arrived, and Melissa had chosen her dignity. The following days after the dinner carried a strange quiet. Daniel barely spoke to Melissa, his silence heavy, his pride wounded. He came home late, avoided her gaze, and pretended nothing had changed. But Melissa felt the shift deep in her bones. She was no longer afraid of his silence, no longer desperate for his approval. She had walked through humiliation and found her voice on the other side. One evening, Daniel finally broke the silence. He stood in the living room, his tie loose, his expression sharp. "So, that's it? You embarrass me in front of my entire family, and you think you've won?" Melissa looked up from the papers spread across the coffee table. "This was never about winning, Daniel. It's about respect. And I won't live in a house where I'm treated like I don't matter." His eyes narrowed. "You're tearing this family apart." Her voice was calm but firm. "No. You did that every time you mocked me, every time you dismissed me. I stayed quiet for years, but silence doesn't hold a family together. It breaks it." Daniel's voice rose. "And what about the kids? You think they need a mother chasing her little business dreams instead of putting them first?" Melissa stood, her bracelet catching the lamplight. "They need a mother who shows them dignity, who teaches them that love doesn't mean being small. They need to see me strong, not silent." For a moment, Daniel had no words. His confidence, once unshakable, faltered in the face of her steady defiance. He clenched his jaw, fists tightening at his sides. "You're not the woman I married." Melissa took a deep breath, her heart steady. "You're right. I'm stronger. And I won't go back to who I was just to make you comfortable." The weight of her words filled the room. The years of unspoken pain, the quiet sacrifices, the nights spent swallowing tears, they all crystallized into this moment. She wasn't pleading, she wasn't shouting, she was declaring her truth. The children peeked from the hallway, sensing the tension. Melissa turned to them, her expression softening. "Come on, it's time for bed." Chloe's small hand slipped into hers, and Melissa felt her daughter's quiet trust. Behind them, Daniel stood frozen, left alone in his silence. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Melissa sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the moonlight spilling through the curtains. She felt both exhausted and lighter than ever before. For years, she had feared this confrontation, convinced it would break her. But instead, it had set her free. She realized Daniel had lost the power to define her. His words no longer shaped her worth. Whether their marriage could survive or not, Melissa knew one truth: she would never again allow herself to be diminished. When she walked into the kitchen the next morning, Daniel was there, his coffee untouched, his expression weary. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "Melissa," he muttered, "I don't know what you expect from me anymore." She met his eyes without hesitation. "Respect. And if you can't give me that, then I'll keep walking forward without you." The silence that followed was thick, but Melissa didn't waver. She had made her stand. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she felt entirely in control of her own life. The house felt different now. The silence that once weighed Melissa down no longer had the same power. She moved through her days with a quiet strength, her steps lighter, her heart no longer chained by Daniel's scorn. Whether he chose to change or not, Melissa had already decided her path. Her consulting work continued to flourish. New clients reached out, impressed by her creativity and clarity. She worked hard, balancing her projects with the responsibilities of motherhood, but now she carried it all with purpose. The late nights no longer felt like a burden. They felt like building blocks for the future she was creating. On her next birthday, Melissa gathered friends and family for a celebration of her own choosing. This time there was no forced smile, no humiliation hidden behind polite laughter. The air was filled with genuine warmth. Rachel raised her glass with pride. To Melissa, the woman who refused to stay silent and proved to herself and to all of us that dignity is worth fighting for. Cheers erupted around the table. Ethan and Eric clapped her on the back, and Chloe beamed at her from across the room. For the first time in years, Melissa felt fully seen. Later that evening, as she walked outside to breathe in the cool night air, Chloe followed her. The little girl slipped her hand into Melissa's. "Mom, this was the best party ever." Melissa smiled softly. "I'm glad you think so." Chloe tilted her head. "You look happy. Like, really happy." Melissa knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. "That's because I am. And I want you to remember something, Chloe. Never let anyone make you feel small. You are strong, and your voice matters. Don't ever forget that." Chloe hugged her tightly, her small arms wrapping around her neck. "I won't. I promise." As Melissa held her daughter, she felt the weight of her journey settle into something deeper than triumph. It was legacy, her choices, her defiance, her courage. It was shaping not only her future, but her children's understanding of love and strength. Inside, Daniel lingered near the back of the room, his posture stiff. He hadn't spoken much that night. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. He looked at Melissa differently now, not with the arrogance of ownership, but with the uneasy recognition that she was beyond his control. Whether he chose humility or solitude was his decision. Melissa no longer waited for it. She turned away, the laughter of her friends filling the air. She was surrounded by people who valued her, who cheered for her without condition. That was enough. More than enough. As the evening drew to a close, Melissa stood by her SUV, her bracelet glinting under the porch light. She thought back to the woman she had been a year ago, quiet, uncertain, swallowed by humiliation. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone unafraid to claim her space in the world. Melissa opened the driver's door, her children climbing in with sleepy smiles. Chloe leaned against her shoulder. "Can we do this again next year?" Melissa kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. Every year from now on, we'll celebrate properly." She started the engine, the low hum filling the night, and as she drove away, Melissa felt the road open wide before her. A future not defined by Daniel, not restricted by silence, but built by her own hands. The humiliation that once chained her had become the spark of her liberation. And with every mile ahead, Melissa knew she had stepped into a new dawn. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like Melissa's. And if you want to keep watching, click on the video suggested on your screen. You won't want to miss it.